Rock Dam, and we get, well, Little Rock Dam is kind of fickle, so we can get anywhere from 0 water from it in a year up to about 4,000 acre feet. So again, that third quarter, 3/4 of a football field stacked 4,000 feet high. Sometimes we get that from Little Rock Dam. This year we're expecting about 3,000 acre feet out. But typically it accounts about for 10% of the water that we use on an annual basis. The other one is groundwater. So we have 22 active wells in our system. We pull water out from the ground, from the aquifers, and we're really fortunate because it's good, high-quality water. It just requires some disinfection to make sure that it stays safe as it travels through pipes to homes. That's our bedrock. So we know that we can pull anywhere from, well, we know we can pull consistently about 8,000 acre feet from the ground if we need to. On what we try to target is about 6,000 acre feet if we have a normal water year. We haven't had a normal water year in a long time. But we can pull anywhere from 4,500 to 12,000 acre feet. On average, it accounts for about 40,000, or 40% of our total water supply. But you can see, if we're looking at trying to cover 20,000 acre feet on an annual basis, Little Rock, even if we get 4,000 out of it, and even if we get 12,000 out of the wells, we still need water from somewhere else. And we know that we're not going to get 4,000 every year from Little Rock, and we know that we can't pull 12,000 acre feet every year from the groundwater. So we have to have some other supply. So that third critical piece for us is the state water project. And that accounts for about half of our water. And we, on an annual basis, half the water we get comes from the aqueduct. We've all seen that concrete river that snakes through the Antelope Valley. Half of our water supply comes from that. So there's a term up here, Table A allotment. We have a contract with the Department of Water Resources for 21,300 acre feet of water. It sounds great, but there's a lot of things that can come into play that reduce our allotment. So what they do is at the beginning of the year, they'll tell us, you can count on 5% of your allotment. And then if things improve, they'll say, oh, you can count on 15%. Or if we have years like this year, it'll go, you can count on 5, you can count on 15, never mind, you can count on 5. So, so that when we're in a drought, what really matters to us probably the most is what's happening in Northern California, where the source of the State Water Project is. So just to give a little bit of example here, the blue line is the aqueduct. And there we are down there in the Antelope Valley. That water is being pumped in from the Sacramento Bay Delta, or the San Francisco Bay Delta area, right up there. But it really originates like 200 miles further up in the Oroville, in the Feather River watershed, and it pools up behind Oroville Dam. You guys might remember a few years back, Oroville Dam, when it spilled, and there's a lot of water coming down through that area, created a lot of damage. That was kind of the opposite situation of what we're having right now. There was too much water that year and actually overflowed. But what we count on is snowfall in that area, in that circle, to fill up that dam so that we can release water down the Feather River into the Bay Delta and then pull it out into the aqueduct. So that's where that 50% of our water source comes from, almost 600 miles away. So I would be remiss if I don't point out that we're very fortunate. We have Lake Palmdale, and that's where water from Little Rock Dam comes and fills that up. And also we pull in water from the State Water Project and keep it full. So you'll notice that generally, like even in times of drought, during our last drought, the lake really wasn't low, because what we're trying to do is keep it slowly and steadily filled with water. And what happens is we take that water out as it's coming in and process it through our treatment plant and turn it into drinking water. But we try to keep the inflow and the outflow about the same so that we keep a relatively steady lake level. We can hold up to 4,000 acre feet in it when it's full. And it provides us with a pretty good buffer. One of the things we're looking at this year is, given the low amount of supplies, there's a good chance that we could end the year with a very, very low Lake Palmdale. And possibly lower than we've had it in the past, depending on how the water supply situation works out and how conservation works throughout the year. So I've kind of talked through all of our sources, went through them pretty quick. Judy's like, slow down, Peter, slow down. But do you guys have any questions on our supply, where it comes from, anything related to supply? All right.
I'm going to ask a question.
Sure.
If it's okay. Do we as a community have any say over like I've seen a lot of a high amount of water being dumped into the delta that maybe a lot of us don't think really needs to, an amount over what we think needs to be there. Do we have any say about what happens up there? Is there any way to make a little noise and get people to get the water coming to us instead of being dumped? At least that's a perception.
Right,
that I have.
right. No, that's a very good question. That's one of, I mean, if you're in Southern California, the perception is more of like, why are you just releasing all this water out? If you're in Northern California, a lot of the perception is, why are you taking our water from to the south? I'll get to you in just a second. We'll finish this one. But it is a pretty complex situation. So a lot of the water that they complain is released just to the ocean really is being used. Go back here. I don't know if my laser works or not. Up above the Bay Delta there, where my middle circle is, that's open to the ocean. So the tides bring in salt water. If they don't release enough fresh water out, the salt water intrudes. And that looks like, that it's all blue in that area, but really that's a whole lot of farmland if you go out there. It's not, there's a lot of levees, there's a lot of farms. If they let the salt water come back too far, then it could ruin a lot of the farms, and also the other argument is change habitat substantially. That doesn't mean there still isn't an argument for better management of that water. One of the things that is kind of a good segue is we are having the general manager of the state water contractors come down and give a talk on what recently was the voluntary agreements. So you might have noticed that Department of Water Resource, the state water project sue each other, environmental groups sue each other on a regular basis, arguing over things like the delta smelt or the fish or the flow that gets released. What they've decided to do is drop those lawsuits and come to the table and work on what would be better science. So better science for handling the endangered species, better science for using flow through the delta in a better managed way that allows us to export a reasonable amount, but also preserve some of that farmland and habitat that's out there. So there is a really good turn right now towards collaboration versus just sniping with lawsuits. If you're interested in making some noise behind that, one thing I would say is I would be supportive of things like voluntary agreements where we're actually kind of all sitting down at the table and discussing it rather than fighting in court. Because only the lawyers win when we do that. Alternatively, I'd say if you talk to your state reps, that's a good way to kind of help bring focus on the water issue and make sure that it's being looked at in a fair way. It's a long-winded answer.
No, I think there's a lot more to say about it, so we could probably go on for an hour. I mean, I think there's more, there's a lot of stuff going on. And I understand now Newsom's got some court approval to remove some dams. Is that smart?
I hadn't heard that. But, I do think, this is a big water issue that you did want to make some noise over. One of the things that seems to be very true is that we seem to be seeing more flashy periods of water where we get a lot of water, we go through drought cycles. We get a lot of water, we go through drought cycles. The system wasn't designed for that type of input. So what you need in order to handle that kind of input is more storage. So more surface storage. That might mean more dams, more groundwater banking storage. That's another big one that's important. So those things can be used in a way that allows us to capture the water when it's really wet and when it's not necessarily needed for environmental purposes, and store it off-site so that it can be used in these dry years. So if this is the new normal where we're cycling really heavy between wet and dry, storage really is the answer to that. And that would be something that I would encourage anyone, if you're looking at, like, you want to make a difference in the water world over the next 20, 30 years, it's aimed towards finding a way to store that water when it's available.
Okay, you let us know when to make the noise.
Okay.
Because that one I'm on board with.
All right, cool. Very cool. You had a question?
No,
sir?
what you already said.
Oh, okay.
But, yeah, that's true, the water goes through the river that goes through the ocean for the salmon, right? Like you said, and they say 75% of the water is used for agriculture, like almond trees. And we get like, what, 20%?
Yeah, I think it's like close to about 10%.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, you already explained.
No, it's true. So the municipal uses are not a big chunk of the pie, but a larger piece is the agricultural uses. That's very true. But given the kind of like the flashiness that we're experiencing, where we're having these prolonged dry periods, we have a contract with the Department of Water Resources that says we can only take a certain amount. So no matter whether we argue that more is going to ag or more is going to the ocean, the reality is we only have certain set contracts with DWR, and we have to work within those frameworks. So for us, like, our long-term vision is to have our own storage that we can put water in, so that when we do have these flashy years, we take as much full advantage of that as we can, store the water in the ground, store the water in other reservoirs, so that we're able to ride through these years. And you'll see a lot of that from Palmdale Water District over the next probably 5 years. A lot of discussion on increasing our use of recycled water, increasing our ability to store the water from the State Water Project during the wet years. So you'll hear about those projects. So if you can help us out, where if anybody's like, oh, why are they spending money on storing water? What is this all about? Why are they spending water on or money on advanced treatment for recycled water? It's in order to like buffer against these dry years that we're having, that really were unprecedented, before like 2013 in terms of the State Water Project.
One more thing, desalination, and that's it for me. It's gonna be happen maybe in the ocean someday. They gonna
Desalination. It's a good question, right? There's a lot of water there.
Yeah.
So the real difficult issue with desalination is that it's really energy intensive. Yeah, so it's very expensive, but also it kind of runs counter to California's desire to go green. You're gonna create a huge energy sink with putting in desalination, because moving water through reverse osmosis membranes takes a lot of energy. So that complicates California's energy vision, and it is very expensive. And for us, we're so far inland that you end up having to pump it up and over mountain ranges, which increases the energy and the cost. So that's the difficult part, but I think it's entirely possible that coastal cities may move towards more desalination in the future.
You were talking about storage. Is there state money for that? Because we've passed several bonds, at least two massive ones. There should be money for infrastructure that's not being used. Can we use it?
Yeah, that's something that Palmdale Water District's been pretty active as far as looking at what's available for us to use. I think what we're looking at is some funds for supporting the recycled water augmentation. We don't have anything shovel-ready for groundwater bank yet, so there's not funds yet, but we're going to keep our ear out over the next 2 as that becomes more possible. So if there's grant money available in 1-2 years, we're probably going to take advantage of that for groundwater storage purposes.
Why do we not have shovel ready? And I'm not blaming anybody, but I'm saying there's already projects that were going years ago. I've visited projects out towards Roseman and stuff that were groundwater banking areas, already identified and ready to go. Why are we
No,
not
that's
using
true.
those?
So there's this, if I can get the Willow Springs.
That might be the one I
The
was
state
at.
is still working on trying to get that one up and running. It had a lot of Prop 1 money behind it. If it were to be something that took off, PWD would be interested in it. We're also looking at partnering with Antelope Valley East Kern Water Agency. They're building a water bank called High Desert, and it's out near the Willow Springs Bank. And that looks like that'll be ready in 2 to 5 years. We also did some testing to see if we could do banking in our area as well, and we just didn't have the geology for it, unfortunately. We did spend a few years really searching out, trying to see if we could put water in our service area and pull it back out, but Mother Nature just wasn't friendly to us as far as that goes. We are looking at a couple other options that are in development up north of us that we might be able to join on to. So we're looking at them. There's just not, at this point, there's not anything that we could buy into today and put water in tomorrow.
Well, the problem is we didn't look into it 50 years ago and we should have been building.
True. And if definitely, I think that's one of those things. It's if we had the foresight that things were going to be as flashy as they were, that would have been a no-brainer. Like even like 20 years ago. But the drought that we went through in 2013 through the 16 time period was at that time considered unprecedented. And DWR came out with with their reports and analysis based on their models and said, well, worst case scenarios, we'll have another drought like this, maybe. And we already beat it with 2020 through 2022. It's worse than what was considered an unprecedented drought. What had been looked at before as a luxury to have storage is now a necessity. So.
Our population more than doubled. I don't know why it was considered a luxury, but that's not new, I know, but I don't understand why people weren't.
Yeah, I have a graph that kind of will kind of go into that. There was a lot more confidence in the consistency of the state water project up until our last drought, and now it's really dwindled following these last 2 cycles of drought. Leon?